Welcome to this series, this first of our three-part series, India at 75. At midnight, August the 15th, 1947, the Indian Independence Bill came into force, ending almost 200 years of British colonial rule on the subcontinent and carving out the new independent dominions of India and Pakistan. In the first few years of independence, India was plunged into chaos, reeling from high levels of poverty in the aftermath of a bloody partition. But fast forward 75 years and the country has transformed. In September 2022, the economy overtook its former colonial ruler, Britain, to become the fifth largest economy in the world. Education and literacy rates have progressed, witnessed by the high numbers of Indians studying at elite universities, and the diaspora are occupying senior roles in the world's biggest tech companies, including Google and Microsoft. And the country is quickly becoming an important geopolitical actor, spending around 76.6 billion on its military, the third highest in the world after China and the United States. But some problems persist. Religious conflict between Hindus and Muslims is on the rise. Democracy, by many measures, is in decline. In this new series, India at 75, we'll explore the biggest issues facing India 75 years after its independence and where the country will be headed in the next 75. In part one tonight, we'll be discussing secularism and the rise of Hindu nationalism with Rana Ayyub. Rana is a multi-award-winning journalist. She's a global opinion writer for The Washington Post. She's one of India's most high-profile critics of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In 2016, she self-published Gujarat Files, a controversial book about the 2002 riots in which around 1,000 people, mostly Muslims, were killed in Gujarat. Because of her journalism and speaking out, she's faced death and rape threats online. The UN Human Rights Office has called on authorities in India to act urgently to protect her. In 2022, her bank accounts were frozen. She was prevented from boarding a flight from Mumbai airport due to an investigation into tax fraud, which she says is politically motivated. As The Atlantic describes her to her detractors, Ayyub is nothing more than an activist defaming India's image on the world stage. To her supporters, she is a rare voice speaking truth to power. Thank you, Rana, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kavita, for having me here.
India's constitution, as you well know, was drawn up in 1950 after independence, and it enshrines India as a secular democracy. Those were the very ideals that Nehru spoke of on that famous 15th of August 1947 address. Do you feel that's at stake now?
Well, we are living in India on the 75th year of Indian independence. Jawaharlal Nehru was absent from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's own election day speech. He has been removed from all government publications on Independence Day. So that kind of explains in a way where India is headed, where secularism seems to be a terrible word. It seems to be a word that a majority of Hindu Indians detest because, as many of them say, that Muslims have 57 countries to go to. Why India? Leave India to the Hindus. So we have, on the 75th year of Indian independence, I think we have many reasons to worry, and the foremost being the secular values which India took great pride in, the pluralism, the diversity. I think that is under attack. And I say this not just as a Muslim, a practicing Muslim in India, but as a journalist and a citizen of this country who has believed in the ideals of the Constitution of India.
Do people even talk about, or do they use the word secularism in political discourse?
Well, there was a time that we used to, where secularism was a word that would often be used by leaders in power to espouse a pluralistic approach of governance. But ever since Mr. Modi has come to power in the last 8 years, secularism has been conveniently absent from discourses that are enabled by the state. So secularism as a term is now only relegated to editorials written by people who want to keep the idea of India alive. Secularism is an idea, is something that is only cherished by those who have been standing up against the divisive and bigoted politics that India has been witnessing.
There are 200 million Muslims in India, around 14% of the population. Just give us an overview of how the government has been cracking down on Indian Muslims.
Well, Kavita, to begin with, as soon as Mr. Modi came to power, I think that one of the most disturbing features was the lynching of Muslims on alleged allegations of consuming beef. And I remember this case of Pehlu Khan and Ikhlaq back in 2015 when they were murdered for allegedly consuming beef. When the cops went to their place to investigate, they checked the refrigerators of the deceased to check if the meat was actually beef or other flesh. So that and one of the cabinet ministers in Mr. Modi's government, an important cabinet minister, later went on to honor and garland those people who had killed these Muslims on allegation of consumption of beef. That's how we start with. I mean, this attack on the cultural and dietary habits of Muslims. Then, of course, you have the triple talaq bill, in which triple talaq was criminalized. I mean, for the outside world, Mr. Modi presented it as an attempt to liberate Muslim women, which a lot of saviors in the West have done in the past. Everybody wants to liberate what they see as backward Indian Muslim women. But what they were actually doing, which we now see a clear picture, is they were attacking Muslim religious practices to make it to criminalize Muslim men and throw them behind bars. I mean, as a Muslim woman, I completely detest the practice of triple talaq because it is not something that even Islamic countries practice. But here the Modi government was not doing it with the intent to save women, Muslim women. If that was the intent, then Bilkis Bano, a victim of the Gujarat genocide of 2002, who was gang raped and her family members killed, her killers would not be out on remission. So, of course, the triple talaq bill, then the Citizenship Amendment Act, which basically discredits, delegitimizes Muslims as citizens of this country. So India's, according to the act, citizenship will be given to persecuted minorities from neighboring countries except Muslims. And now the Citizenship Amendment Act, along with the population bill, seeks to delegitimize and throw out Muslims who have been living in India for decades. So these are the practices that are being brought in day in, day out. Your uniform civil code, the Babri Masjid judgment, wherein while an earlier Supreme Court judgment agreed that the demolition of the Babri Masjid was a criminal act, it goes on to give the masjid premises to Hindu nationalists. And the Prime Minister of India, in the middle of COVID-19, does a Bhumi Pujan, lays the foundation stone of the temple. It does not stop with Babri. It goes on with, now we have the Gyan Vyapi proceedings, where Hindu nationalists and Hindu organizations are saying that beneath many other temples like Gyan Vyapi, there is a Shiv temple beneath the mosque. So every day in India is being made into a nightmare for Muslims, their religious practices. Look at the hijab ban, while women in Iran are fighting to not wear the hijab, this hegemony of men. In India, the bodies of Muslim women are being used as a playground for fascists, where Muslim women in Karnataka who want to wear it as a part of their fundamental right to wear it are being stopped, are being heckled by Hindu nationalists from going to school just because they're wearing a hijab. So these are just a very few examples on the state-enabled, sanctioned Islamophobia in India, which directly threatens the 220 million Muslim population in India, the third largest in the world, who now feel like victims in their own country. They don't feel like equal citizens.
Well, it's interesting you say victims in their own country, because if you go back 75 years, one of the main arguments for Muhammad Ali Jinnah made when he was arguing for the creation of Pakistan was that he felt that the Muslim minority then wouldn't be protected by the Hindu majority. And I suppose every Muslim family in India had to make a decision in 1947 whether to stay or whether to go. And I suppose this is perhaps what they feared would happen. But your family made that decision to stay. Just tell me a little bit about that.
My father, Kavita, is Midnight's child. He was born in as the same month and the same year that India got independence. And I've often asked this question of him. I said, Abba, as much as I love my Indianness and I'm proud, and there's nothing else that there's nowhere else I would have wanted to be born in, whose citizenship I would seek. And I was very curious as to why my family and my forefathers decided to stay back. And he said, this is our home, and you don't leave your home. You don't leave the land of your forefathers just like that. And that's the only answer. That's an answer that I've been getting from my uncles and aunts who I've known. He said, each time I would ask them, why didn't our family go to Pakistan? They would say, why Pakistan? We are North Indians. Our family has lived in Uttar Pradesh. Our generations of our family has lived in Uttar Pradesh it's a North Indian state for generations. Why would we leave? Why would we be uprooted from our culture and our land? So that's the belief with which Muslims decided to stay, and which is precisely why, and we stayed here because of the assurance given by leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru and Ambedkar that we will be safe here. This is going to be our country. We are going to have equal rights, just like our Hindu counterparts, our Christian counterparts. But today, like you said, Jinnah's fears, I hate to say this, is coming true. Not that I agree with Jinnah, but Mr. Modi is trying to prove him right. Mr. Modi is trying to prove the detractors of Gandhi and Nehru right by treating Muslim minorities in India as second-class citizens in their own country.
Do you think your family has ever regretted that decision?
Never. Till this day, I don't think a single family member of mine, none of us ever, whether it's me or my siblings, we are such desis that we never even went to universities abroad to get higher education. I can't even begin to tell how much, it's a shame that we have to prove our patriotism and love for the nation, that me and my brother and my nieces and my nephews feel for this country, the goosebumps that we get when we listen to speeches during the independence movement. But it's unfortunate that my nieces are still being asked in good humor in their schools if they are going to support Pakistan during an India-Pakistan match. So nothing has changed. When I was in school, I would be asked this question in good humor. So which team are you going to support today, India or Pakistan? That India-Pakistan match is a great test of patriotism for Muslims, right? Nothing has changed today. My nieces come home some days with tears in their eyes saying, that they do feel the othering, that they do feel the othering in their classrooms. And it is a feeling that I resented back in the day when I was a student, and I thought things would change in a modern India. But unfortunately, we are only regressing backwards.
I want to look back before Modi was in power and the dynamic between the Hindu and Muslim communities then, because there was also a very pivotal moment when you were 9 that made you feel other.
Yeah. Kavita, at no point when I was growing up did this idea of Hindu and Muslim and us or them ever. We were the only Muslim family in a predominant Hindu locality where my father was a government school teacher. So all the locals would come for admissions to their school on Teachers' Day, on Guru Purnima, which is the day they worship teachers. They would come and tie a thread to his hand as the teacher, as the guru. So we felt so needed and respected. On Diwali, we had more fun as opposed to Eid because we would be everywhere. We would be at our neighbor's house preparing for the festivities. So at no point did we as Muslims feel that we were ever threatened, or none of us were really conscious of our Muslim identity because we were Indians more than anything else. But on 6th December 1992, it's something that each time when I speak about it, I get goosebumps because That's not an age. I was 9, my sister was 14, my siblings were very young. The age where you are, dealing with romanticism of your country and everything beautiful, you are, you have to deal with the harsh reality. On that morning, a poster was pasted on the door of our house, which said, "Chalo Ayodhya 6 December. Let's go to Ayodhya on the 6th of December." And our neighbor, there's this woman, amazing woman, who was mom's best friend. She came and said, "Do you know, Didi? Do you smell the whiff from Babri that is all over the city?" And my mom got into the room and she said, "I don't." It's not her. The language that she's speaking is not her. And at a very early age, we knew about a Rath Yatra, that leaders, Hindu nationalists, are going around talking about the demolition of a mosque. And overnight, there was a feeling of fear that I had never experienced before. And before we knew it, a mob of Hindu nationalists were on the way to our house to pick me and my sister, because that's what we do during communal riots. We have witnessed that women end up becoming like the playground for these mobs, right? If you assault them sexually, then you feel like you've assaulted the entire family. So a Sikh neighbors, they rescued me and my sister. We escaped the house in the middle of the night through the window of our bathroom, and we stayed with a Sikh family for months as refugees. And I remember when friends would visit the Sikh family in their house, it used to be Lodi, which is a festival in Punjab, and they would say, "Who are these girls?" And the Sikh family would say, "Oh, they're refugees, they're Muslims." That was not an age. I was 9, and that was the first time I was made to feel an other in my own country. I've repeated this story many times, and each time I repeat it, it's a very unpleasant feeling, because I thought it's not an age where you actually burn posters of radical speeches. I used to burn speeches by Hindu nationalists as a form of my own resentment. I would cry and I would talk to Allah saying, "Why is this happening to us?" And I had no access to my family members. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have, back in the day, we didn't have a landline. So it was months before we got to know that our family members were still alive. And from then on, the decline of India is consistent and it only gets worse. And in the last 8 years, it's beyond our own worst expectations of the othering of Indian Muslims.
And when you were 19, before we get on to 2014, when the BJP took power, you were a relief worker in Gujarat when the riots happened. Just explain briefly what you witnessed there.
So I used to feel very helpless, because at the age of 9, when this mob came and we were all helpless and we took refuge, I remember the 2002 riots, the communal riots, were the first televised 24-hour news channels had made their mark in India. It was the first fully televised communal riot in the history of India. And I remember watching it along with family members in fear. That was also the year my brother got married, and I remember the festivities were on, and my father would say, "Should we call off the wedding, because it looks like it's going to be a repeat of what we saw in 1993. And we lived in fear. And at that point of time, some of my friends and her sister and her siblings were going to Gujarat for relief work. They were affiliated with the Red Cross. And they said, "Would you want to come along?" I was only 19, and I was seen as this really introverted, shy kid. And I don't know, I felt that was the moment I did not want to feel helpless. I wanted to get rid of the helplessness that I had felt all my life. So I went to Gujarat by a train. I told my family that I'm going on a trek. We went to Gujarat, and what I saw in 2002 in Gujarat, in the relief camps, the stories that I heard from Muslim women who were gang raped, from children who were orphaned, was an exact repeat of a glimpse of what we got in 1993. And the same narrative, Narendra Modi, a Hindu leader who thought that Islamists were going to overtake India. And it was so visible that not a single day was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, Narendra Modi, out on the field asking Hindus to stop the violence, or giving a speech, or just coming out and asking for peace to be maintained. And it was a scar for me. It scarred me for life, and which is why Gujarat, the genocide of Gujarat, it has remained a memory with me that is a constant, that finds constant mention in my articles and op-eds, because that is not just the journey of communalism and far-right nationalism in India, but it also tracks the journey of Narendra Modi's leadership as this Hindu nationalist leader who wanted to give Hindus their pride of supremacy in India. And that's where we are today.
Well, it's worth pointing out at the time he was chief minister, and that led to you becoming a journalist, and you were involved in an undercover sting when you were working as an investigative reporter, where you infiltrated Modi's administration undercover. But interestingly, the journal that commissioned you to and supported you during those many months of the sting didn't publish it, and you had to wait a number of years, and you had to actually self-publish it yourself. That became the book, The Gujarat Files, and you made some pretty damning allegations against Modi and his allies and their complicity. But it's also worth pointing out Modi has always denied these allegations, and he has never been charged. And the Supreme Court said there was no evidentiary value to the transcripts, and no court has ever actually asked for the audio tapes to investigate these claims. I mean, how do you respond to all of that?
Two clarifications, Kavita. One, the Supreme Court of India in an open court in 2004 had called the Modi government modern-day Neros who looked the other way, as innocent children, houses and women were being gang raped and killed. That's the observation of the Supreme Court of India in 2002 by Justice Arijit Pasayat, who was later maligned by Mr. Modi and his leadership. The second, the Supreme Court judge who said that my book is based on surmises and conjectures is a Supreme Court judge who has not even read my book on record, nor has asked for the tapes of my recordings. And this is also the Supreme Court judge who has later, when he retired, gone on to say that Prime Minister Modi is the greatest leader in the world, not casting aspersions, but just to put this on record. When I went undercover in 2010, this was the same year that my investigation had landed one of the key ministers of Mr. Modi's government, Amit Shah, who's now the most important man in India, the Home Minister of India, behind bars for extrajudicial murder of Muslim women, including a woman called Kausar B, who was raped, sedated, and killed. I went undercover because the story of 2002 Gujarat riots, I think the evidences in the riots were not forthcoming. And Mr. Modi was being investigated by commissions of inquiry, but he had developed amnesia. So had the officials who were being investigated by commissions of inquiry. All the officers of Mr. Modi's government who were questioned about the Gujarat riot developed amnesia. All of them said consistently that they do not remember the chain of events. For me, at that point of time, as a journalist, it was important to go undercover when I'd exhausted all other forms of journalistic resources to go undercover and get the truth from these officials. So I did a sting operation where I wore 8 cameras on my body as a Hindu nationalist, posing as a Hindu nationalist, Maithili Tyagi, and met Mr. Modi's rank and file, including the Home Secretary, the Chief of Police, the Chief of Administration, and the Home Secretary of Gujarat, Mr. Ashok Narayan, and said on my sting camera that Mr. Modi benefited from the Gujarat riots of 2002 and that he did not call for the forces, that he suspended officials who were saving Muslim lives. This is all on record. I published the book in 2016 as a self-published book. All the transcripts of the tapes are out in the book. Till today, it's been 6 years since I published the book. Not a single official who I have quoted in the book, whose transcripts I have published, has gone on to say that I did not say this, which means that everything that I have put on record. In an ideal world, the Supreme Court would ask for the tapes of these conversations to investigate. But these are the times we live in.
You are very outspoken. The work, like the Gujarat Files, ruffles a lot of feathers. You have been harassed. You have received death threats, rape threats. A deeply disturbing deepfake pornographic video of you was shared online. Your personal details were made public. You're paying a very high personal cost. What is that like? What is the effect on you?
Well, Kavita, I arrived in Chicago 2 days ago to spend 3 months at the Institute of Politics, and I thought that as soon as I get here, I might get a relief from all that the harassment that is being inflicted on me. But today, when I opened the newspapers, I saw the Indian Foreign Minister give an interview in Washington D.C. that publications like the Washington Post are running a propaganda against the Indian government in the West, and he in as many words, pointed out to my writings in the Washington Post as an opinion writer. So that's the topmost officer, and this is just an um, everyday part of my life. Just before I was leaving for Chicago, a court summons was issued to me about an investigative story that I did in 2008 about Hindu nationalists and their involvement in terror attacks. The complaint by the Hindu nationalist against me says that my journalism is influenced by my faith. And the court has initiated proceedings against me in that case 16 years later, just as I was about to leave. This is just a very small window into the world of the harassment that I have faced. Multiple publications have researched about the kind of threats that I received. 8.5 million tweets registered against me in 3 months, emerging out of India, calling me a jihadi Jain. My image morphed on a porn video circulated all over the internet. Alleged photoshops with leaders of the opposition, photoshops with critics of the government saying I have sexual relationships with people. My bank account frozen for relief work that I did for COVID-19 victims. Aspersions cast on my integrity. There is not a single thing that exists in the playbook of the government that has not been used against me or my family members, stopped at the airport from flying out of India to speak about freedom of speech and democracy. So every day I pay a cost that nobody really knows, and a cause that I do not speak about to the world because I feel that I do not have to make myself the story. But unfortunately, in Modi's India, I am the hunted and the hunter. God knows, I mean, that's what they say a lot of times. But I do feel that some days it gets exhausting, but that's the life I've chosen for myself. And that's the India we are living in, where those who bear witness to the India story every day are being targeted relentlessly. Some of our best activists and journalists are behind bars. Mohammed Zubair was behind bars for almost a month for an innocuous tweet that he put out 5 years ago about a film. For that, he was behind bars for at least 1 month. Gauri Lankesh, a journalist, was murdered allegedly by Hindu nationalists outside her house. And Gauri had translated my book Gujarat Files in Kannada language, and we were supposed to do a book launch in Karnataka of Gujarat Files with her, and she was killed weeks before that. So this is an everyday life of people who choose to speak. Safura Zargar, an activist from Jamia, she was pregnant when she was arrested, and today, a few weeks ago, her PhD degree has been cancelled by Jamia Millia Islamia. It's a price each one of us is paying, and we continue to pay.
And is that why the media in India, the kind of, for the large part, don't report on the kind of stories that you are reporting from? Is there a self-censorship going on?
Well, I feel a lot of people say that the media in India is ideologically bankrupt, they are bigoted, but I feel that the media in India is actually quite opportunist. There are people who want to save their jobs. There are people who want to bask in the favors lent by the government of the day. These are people who are happy to dog whistle against a 220 million Muslim population as long as they get promotions in their respective jobs. And then these are the very editors and mainstream publishers who will reach out to me saying, Rana, you don't have loans to pay, but we have loans to pay and we have to look our children. My question to them is, if you had loans to pay, then why be a witness? Why be a journalist in a country like India whose story needs to be told to the world? Mr. Modi brought more than 10 cheetahs on his birthday, which was drummed down as some kind of an achievement. And I can tell you, there was a caption on a leading news channel in India by the India Today group that says, Sher Cheetah Laya. And the lion has got the cheetahs in India. I mean, it's nauseating. It is nauseating to see the extent to which the mainstream media is not just being compromised, but is being used as a tool to extend the government's hate politics against Muslims and minorities. But not a single question. I mean, in an ideal world, the media in India should be asking Narendra Modi. He's been in power since 2014. We are the world's largest democracy. The Prime Minister of India has not taken a single press conference or a single question from a journalist. In an ideal world, media would have, asked him and took him, and media would have, asked these raging questions. But we see the India that we live in, we see mainstream media asking questions of the critics, asking questions of the opposition. Indian media news channels spent 3 days of primetime debates on me and my family, whether we are corrupt, whether we had evaded taxes. I mean, that's the media that we are right now consuming.
I mean, how do you stay objective given everything that you've been through? You are a journalist after all. How do you keep that objectivity?
Honestly, I think, Kavita, objectivity is a myth that journalists need to do away with, because objectivity does not allow us to define the oppressor and the oppressed. Especially in the scenario that we are dealing with, where the media feels compelled to talk about this false equivalence, about this and that. We are looking at a scenario. For instance, the Delhi anti-Muslim riots. When ex-President Trump came to India and he was in Delhi, violence broke out against Muslims following Mr. Modi's leader giving this provocative, a statement that traitors should be shot dead. Traitors, of course, the insinuation was against Muslims. So how do you remain objective when on one side you have the state administration, ministers, cabinet, police, judiciary, and on the other side you have the marginalized, the Muslims and Dalits, against whom these powers are being used. And at a time like this, you see the media doing the false equivalence. I don't think there is space for objectivity in time of authoritarianism, and at a time when Muslims in India are almost at the verge of ethnic cleansing. I don't see objectivity as a matter of pride. In fact, I desire that we identify the oppressor from the oppressed. And that's something, it's not just about India. It's globally when we as journalists report from a country. It is disheartening to talk about India, but I think my Muslimness does come into my reportage, and I won't deny that. I mean, when I say my Muslimness, it's my lived experience. I cannot deny my lived experience in my writings and my reportage. Does that mean I discriminate against the Hindu majority? I don't think. If the Indians who criticize my reporting of Mr. Modi's politics were to just go back 5 years ago and see my reportage of the Congress-ruled UPA government of 8 years and the targeting of Dalits and Adivasis and the backward classes in India, then they would not be leveling these allegations.
How has social media changed the media landscape? I'm talking about in terms of reporting communal tensions, because I know you've talked about social media being democratizing, but it's also been used by Modi with his new powers to oversee social media platforms to regulate inflammatory rhetoric, which could be argued to shut down some voices.
When I said it's a democratic space, so at a time when independent journalists are being silenced by the Modi government and they are resorting to writing blogs and tweeting about what's happening on the ground. So it is a space where in the absence of gatekeepers, we are able to tell a truth that the mainstream media is not telling India. Having said that, Twitter has taken the Indian government to court because the Indian government has asked Twitter to take down tweets by journalists, including me. So there is an attack on Twitter as well. Having said that, while in the absence of gatekeepers, there is also this fear, and is a legit fear that we face every day, where a lynch mob, a virtual lynch mob, attacks us on a daily basis to an extent that, it is overwhelming. It is overwhelming and intimidating because you go on Twitter, every word that you say is being used against you, and this platform, this Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, is now used as a tool by the government, a tool of propaganda. So yes, there are fact checkers in India who do fact checking, but by the time a fake news is used to target dissenters and journalists like me, that fake news spreads faster than the fact-checked news that later goes on. We saw what's happened in London during the communal situation in London between Hindus and Muslims, the role that disinformation played, as rightly put out by a BBC story about the role disinformation played in triggering the communal tension in London. Well, the same situation has prevailed in India, where Hindu nationalism, along with disinformation, has played a crucial part in labeling us as the enemies of the state. I have done this experiment. Some days I just put a full stop on my Twitter. I don't even tweet anything. Just one full stop and I'll get 1,000 replies. Jihadi Jain, where is your burqa? Where is your hijab? So basically, they are not opposing or criticizing what I say. These are people who are there, who have been made to see me as an enemy of the state, an enemy of Hindus, in a country where 82% or 80% Indian Hindus are being made to feel like victims in their own country. So we end up becoming the collateral damage. We, the storytellers, we, the truth tellers, we, the people who are bearing witness, are the ones who have to pay this price offline and online.
Just to add, it's Leicester. I know you meant Leicester, not London.
Yes, I meant Leicester. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I knew you did. You talked right at the start about secularism, how it's rarely discussed, and if it is, it's a kind of pejorative word. Do you think there might be a time where the Constitution may actually be rewritten?
I fear that, Kavita. I do fear that the government of India might rewrite the Indian constitution and get away with the term secularism, which really haunts them. It's like it pricks them every day. It pricks the collective conscience of this country. That secularism, in a way, is a term that is used to appease minorities in the country. Which I think is a myth, the greatest myth that has been sold to the country, that India believes in minority appeasement. If India did believe in minority appeasement, then a maximum number of Muslim populations would not remain underrepresented in the government institutions, in the Indian army. The Muslim representation in across the board, whether it's the bureaucracy, diplomacy, Indian army, the forces, is less than 1%. So some of the commissions of inquiry which have been set to look into the issues of Muslims, the Sachar Committee report, which was to look into the upliftment of Muslims, the Sri Krishna Commission report, which was supposed to look into the genocide of Muslims in '93. If Muslims were to appeased, the bare minimum that would have been given to us was the justice we deserve. Muslims are not being appeased. Muslims are being treated as second-class citizens. And whether it is the Congress or the BJP or Mr. Modi's government, they believe that secularism is a pejorative word where they want to appease Muslims. And I do fear that they are going to get rid of the term secularism so that they can legitimize their attack on the Muslim population in India.
And if that is the case, what does that mean for minorities and for the Muslim population?
Well, it means everyday humiliation. It means Muslims being jailed indiscriminately. As we are talking, members of the Popular Front of India, it's a Muslim organization, they are being jailed all over India in rounds of, in multiple raids across the country. The Enforcement Directorate is charging Muslim activists and journalists with money laundering charges. So what we saw in 2020, when the anti-Muslim riots broke down, that some of the best voices amongst the Muslim community, activists and journalists who are speaking up for the community, are being consistently silent. So right now we are at a space that those who actually spoke about these issues are either jailed or on the verge of being jailed, or others have just received the message that shut up, you're not supposed to speak, because if you do speak, you will have you'll have a battery of allegations. We do not have a Muslim leadership in India. For a 220 million Muslim population, there are these splinter parties that do not actually represent Indian Muslims. There is nobody to speak for Indian Muslims in a country with one of the largest Muslim populations in the world. And if they do come up, then we have seen in the past how Muslim organizations have been demonized by Modi government as organizations that have affiliation to Pakistan, a slur that we Muslims are so used to hearing. But terrorism charges that are so common for Muslim activists in India. So which is why Mr. Modi has consistently and has silenced every Muslim voice that could speak for them. So right now, When I was coming to Chicago, I was looking at the newspapers in Delhi, and there were 8 newspapers. The front page of all newspapers was Muslims planning a terror attack in India. Popular Front of India planning a terror attack in India. Now, this media is consumed by a large section of the Indian population, and then it kind of validates their fears. That we told you Muslims are coming to attack us. Muslims are not loyal to the nation. So this benefits Modi in 2024 elections, the general elections. As we see, Mr. Modi, despite his failures, despite being unable to provide employment to a large section of unemployed in India, despite being unable to alleviate poverty in India, will continue to be a leader because he continues to be a Hindu leader who is the savior of the persecuted Hindus in India.
So finally, for me, and there are some questions and some good questions. Reflecting on 75 years of independence and looking ahead, tell me of some hope of how things could get better. Where is that coming from? Is that a younger generation? I see how the younger generation look across the border and they want to know about their history from the other side. There must be some good news.
Well, Kavita, I've been looking for the good news for a while. I've been looking for that glimmer of hope somewhere, and it's not visible right now. As much as I would want to tell you right now that there is a generation that wants peace, that there's a generation that wants harmony, that there's a generation that wants the India that our forefathers envisaged for the country. But I see that Indians are reveling in the kind of hate and dictatorship that we are witnessing right now. Yes, there is a section that is silent, that might not be very vocal in its criticism of the government. It's a silent section. And I do have great hope that these people will speak up, but it's a very tiny section of the Indian population. And I hope that they can continue with their optimism and their faith in the ideals of India. But at this point of time, and I'm not sure if this is a thought that would be shared by others who are critics of Modi, but I do not have much to celebrate or much to cheer or hope for the present day India where we are headed right now, because I see a very dismal picture. I see a very hopeless situation back in the country.
Thank you, Rana. I'm going to jump onto a question from Jane, who says, why have Muslims been targeted by Modi? What is to be gained from it?
Well, if you see at all the fascist playbooks, whether you see what Trump was doing in America, when you tell the white supremacists that what was originally yours, of the resources that were originally yours, are being taken away from you by those who do not deserve it. And that's exactly what you see in India. Muslims are being sold as invaders and intruders who don't belong here, who are increasing in population every single day, who will take over India by 2050, if you are to believe WhatsApp. But this myth making is being sold by the Indian government to, like I said, in absence of any jobs, in absence of giving any hope to the unemployed, you sell them victimhood, and that victimhood they latch on to because it gives them a convenient enemy. Mr. Modi has used Muslims as a convenient enemy to continue to stay in power. And that's something he has done for decades now. This is Mr. Modi's brand of politics.
Priyanka asks, do you think Hindu nationalism will continue after Modi, or is he central to it?
Well, Mr. Modi and the leaders before him have sowed the seeds of toxic Hindu nationalism, and it won't stop at Modi, because once it's a thing. Once this poison spreads across the country, it is difficult to curtail it or contain it, because it's this victimhood, this persecution complex that Indian Hindus believe they face at the hands of Muslim invaders, which might be unreal, is something that has been lapped up by the collective imagination. And irrespective of Mr. Modi being around or not, this is going to fester for a long time to come. And yes, Mr. Modi is being an opportunist leader by using it to stay in power, but it has damaged the foundations of India. It has damaged the psyche of India. And I feel we are at a stage where we might be beyond redemption.
Graham asks, do you think India really ever had a commitment to secularism when it was founded? And if so, why did that change? Was there a moment that changed?
That is a very
was
good
there?
question.
Yeah, it is a very good question.
I always believed, and it's not a popular opinion, I've always believed that we have been a communal country despite the word secularism and pluralism enshrined in the Indian constitution by Ambedkar and Nehru and Gandhi, that we have resented each other. Let's face it. During the partition movement, Muslims were killed and Hindus were killed. And there was a resentment. The resentment was allowed to fester by nationalists to use it for their opportunistic politics. At various stages in India, we have got glimpses of this hate out in the open, whether it was the 1984 genocide of Sikhs, whether it's the 1992 attack of Muslims. This communal fissures have always existed. It has just been legitimized under the Modi government as a way of life. It has always existed. I think we have always communal politics has always been a part of the Indian landscape, Indian social and cultural landscape. For the longest time, all of us know that if you tell a Hindu family that their daughter or son is going to marry a Muslim, or if you tell a Muslim family that their child is going to marry a Hindu, it is not something that is still something we agree upon to this day. So this is who we have been. It's just that it has been made more acceptable in the times we live in.
Someone asked a question about Leicester and what you make of the recent violence there. Worth pointing out, it's amongst small sections of the Hindu and Muslim population. Do you think Hindu nationalism is a global project?
Well, on the 75th year of Indian independence in New Jersey, there were Hindu nationalists who took out a rally with the bulldozers. Now, the bulldozers have been a sign of oppression of Muslims in India, where Muslim houses are being bulldozed by the government. So when bulldozers are being taken out in processions in America, right here where I am, or in Leicester violence, where a BBC investigation has recently produced that 50% of the tweets on the Leicester violence emanated from India. There's another study recently that more than 75% of hate tweets against Muslims across the world emanate from India. So yes, Hindu nationalism that is emanating from India, this toxic anti-Muslim politics is now spreading its wings across the world, and we must be very worried, considering we are living at a time when fascists are all over Europe. Fascists are gaining popularity all over the world. So at this point of time, we must be very wary. In Leicester, Hindus and Muslims, both in small numbers, were responsible using disinformation, and we must be extremely worried about this right-wing nationalism that threatens to destroy the communal, the secular fabric of not just India, but countries across.
What is the solution to the threat of Hindu nationalism? I mean, and I'd be interested also to know your take on the role of social media companies with regard to the dissemination that's spread on social media platforms.
Well, social media platforms have played a huge role in the popularity of Hindu nationalism, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Twitter or Instagram. I'll give you an example. Earlier, with these Hindu nationalists with saffron flags in their DP, calling themselves Sanatanis, they would post explicit rape threats against me, and when I would call them out, they would delete them. Now, they send these rape threats to me and others on posts in public, and when you call them out, others come in solidarity with them. And despite writing to Twitter and Instagram, other platforms, they are not removed. In fact, Twitter often censors, or Instagram often censors or shadow bans posts when we post videos of protests in India. So they have been enablers. Social media has been enabler of majoritarian politics in India. They have, however, in recent times, tried to develop a spine when they have taken the Indian government to court when the Indian government asked to take down critical tweets of Mr. Modi. So they are trying, but they have been enablers of the Modi government and the Hindutva project.
Fatima asks, what do you think Indian Muslims can do to help the situation? I mean, you touched on the lack of political leadership, but is there anything else that they could be doing?
Well, Indian Muslims should become more vocal, should voice their opinion. Right now, when I'm speaking here, it's a legit fear that whatever I'm speaking here could be used against me as somebody who's trying to discredit the government or discredit Hindu nationalists. So it is a legit fear that people are not speaking up, but that's the only choice you have when you're oppressed. I think, and I would urge Muslims in India and abroad that a backlash to Hindu nationalism by indulging in similar violence or disinformation is not the solution. Yes, there is an attack on Muslim values and Muslims across the India, and the only way to deal with this is dialogue, to speak up and to try to make sure that we do not fall in the victimhood trap that often, and it's not a trap. I think the narrative of the oppressed. It is very easy right now to fall in that narrative, but although I do not see the hope, we have to live with hope. We have to speak up. We have to speak up for the marginalized. We have to speak up for the secular values of India. We have to uphold the secular values of India in India and abroad. And that's the only way out. Dialogue is the only way out. Understanding and empathy is the only way out of the situation as I see it.
Alan asks, are there any Indian universities that challenge the aggressive narrative of Hindu nationalism, which pervades academic subjects, including anthropology, geology, of course, history and politics, or has freedom of thought been extinguished in those institutions too?
Thank you for that question, Alan. In fact, India's universities, especially those built like the Jawaharlal Nehru University, which was, and the Jamia Millia Islamia and Aligarh Muslim University. These are some of the most stellar universities in India that have produced some of the finest minds and activists and freedom fighters. And these universities are now being besmirched, and their activists are being targeted and jailed. Their students are being jailed for campus politics, for resenting Mr. Modi's University in a recent Islamophobic film called Kashmir Files, which is supposed to be on the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits, but that film has been used to dog whistle against Muslims. And the center point in that film is a university like JNU, which is being vilified. So students and student movements in India, yes, they have been, for the longest time, universities have acted as a bulwark against hate politics, but those very universities are being silenced with their students being arrested every day.
What deterrent impact does disapproval of neighbouring Muslim countries like Bangladesh or the countries of the Gulf have, if any? Do you see any external constraints on majoritarian playbook? And maybe that the constraints might include to other countries beyond Muslim countries.
Well, if that means that the criticism by the other governments of Mr. Modi's rule, I think that's rare and it has not happened, except for when there was a remark by the party spokesperson against Prophet Muhammad that Islamic countries did rise up and speak up against Hindu nationalism. But these are countries that are themselves complicit in totalitarianism and authoritarian politics, whether it is Saudis or the Saudis have given Mr. Modi the highest civilian honor. Dubai has always honored and given Mr. Modi the legitimacy. But for the longest time, I think for this audience, it is important to know that Mr. Modi was not allowed to visit America for the longest time for his alleged role into the Gujarat riot. So yes, there have been times, but the United States Secretary Blinken has called out the anti-Muslim hate in India. The Ambassador for Religious Freedom in the United States has published a report where calling out the Islamophobia in India by Mr. Modi's government. So there have been bits and pieces, but not the kind of solidarity and not the kind of one that Indian Muslims would expect or Indian citizens would expect from neighboring countries.
Do you see the rise of the Ambedkarite movement as a hope for a newer Indian anti-fascist movement? And you might need to explain what that is.
I think the Ambedkarite movement, that which is led by people who believe in Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, who's also seen as the messiah of people of the backward classes and caste, especially the Dalits, who are the backward caste in India, the marginalized in India. Every odd day you see stories of Dalit students being thrashed for daring to speak or daring to, sharing the kitchen with the upper caste Hindus. So caste problems and caste discrimination is a reality that India cannot do away with. And whether it's the Ambedkar movement or the Periyar movement or the movement by Muslims, these are movements that one expects to be the bulwark against hate politics in India. These have been movements that have consistently stood up and spoken against the tyranny of the state in the past. So I do see a glimmer of hope there. Yes, they have been allies of the persecuted and the minorities over the years.
These things are all happening in India. We can see that people are slowly and steadily not having faith in secularism because of this government. How can we, as believers of secularism, work on the ground and tell people the truth of this government? How can we stop this propaganda at ground level?
The worst part is, each time I come to the United States or I go to any other European countries, or for that matter, the UK, I see there's so little awareness of what's happening in India. People are so unaware of this communal program that is taking place in India. They always, for the longest time, the world saw Modi and India as this big economy, this big development project. The Economist still puts Mr. Modi on cover as the leader who believes in development. And this idea of Modi being a leader who means development and change in a democratic India has been sold to the white West and to the European countries for far too long. So I think belatedly, though, we need to alert the world about the everyday fascism that is unfolding in the country. At this point of time, the biggest contribution that you can make to secularism is the awareness that you can create about the situation in India. I mean, when the Leicester episode took place, people were like, oh, is this what is happening? Is this also what happens in India? Yet this is a regular feature of what happens in India on a daily basis. So it does not need to happen in Leicester for the world to wake up to this communal project that's unfolding in India.
And then last question, what do you think of the spreading of the right among governments in the last couple of years? What is the cause? So not just in India.
Sorry, I missed the last bit. The riots?
No, the right. So what is the cause for the number of right-wing governments in the last few years?
Well, that's something we all need to introspect, right? I mean, we are electing these people to power and we are buying into this victimhood narrative, this supremacist narrative, that I think it's time for us as citizens of the world to introspect on where we are going wrong. Yes, Italy is electing a far-right leader. Yes, France is electing leaders. Europe is going the fascist way. But deep down, who are the people who are getting influenced by these politics? And what is this victimhood that we are reveling in? I think we need to take a big reality check ourselves before blaming these leaders. There is a churn globally, and this churn, I think, is here to stay for a while. And there's a worrisome prospect for us as a global community.
Rana, thank you for joining us from Chicago. Much food for thought. And thank you to the audience for such brilliant questions. And this is the first of our series, India at 75. And I hope you can join us for the forthcoming ones. Good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Kavita, and thank you, Rana, for what was a really, really fantastic event. I certainly learned a lot from it. And as Kavita mentioned, this is just the first part of a 3-part series we'll be holding over the coming weeks. So do join us next time when we'll have Shashi Tharoor and Joe Johnson discussing Can Britain and India be friends? You can register for that now on intelligencesquare.com. Thanks for joining us again tonight and have a lovely evening. Goodbye.